Title: Whispers in the Hostel, a true paranormal account from Korea. There are certain things you don't expect to bring back with you after a backpacking trip. Ghosts, for example. But something followed us in Korea, and every time I think about it, my whole body goes cold. This is a story I don't like to revisit, but I feel compelled to share it. It was a few years ago when my friend Tu and I decided to backpack through South Korea. We had our maps, our packs, and the naive belief that adventure was just a train ride away. For the most part, we were right. It was vibrant, breathtaking, full of history and kind people. But I have just one piece of advice if you ever go. Bring someone spiritually gifted. Otherwise, you might end up somewhere you should have never been. As any budget traveler knows, cheap hostels are the go-to. Most of the places we stayed were humble, dusty, a little moldy but manageable. We weren't picky. But one night, in the city of Daegu, we booked a hostel that looked decent enough from the outside a boxy building that reminded me of a Super 8. Inside, it was standard backpacker fare. Dorm-style rooms, bunk beds, a single fan lazily moving the hot air, and one shared bathroom per floor. We checked in late in the afternoon and then went out to explore. Across from our hostel was a small family diner. We grabbed food, some soju, and began to relax, until something shifted. Out of nowhere, Tu froze. He stared blankly out the window like he saw something no one else could. I followed his gaze, expecting to see someone or something, but there was nothing. "What are you looking at?" I asked. Silence. I asked again. This time he replied quietly, "Let's not go back to the hostel yet." Tu's family are all shamans. Real, practicing Hmong shamans. He was the only one who wasn't gifted, or so we thought. And me? I didn't believe in any of that spirit world stuff. At least, not back then. We stalled at a local bar instead. As we drank, Tu got up to use the bathroom and never came back. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, thinking he was pranking me, I headed back to the hostel alone. It was well past 2 a.m., the hallways lit only by dim emergency lights. I had to pee desperately, but the restroom on our floor was labeled Women's WC. Groaning, I went to the second floor where the men's room was. The second I opened the bathroom door, I was hit with a wave of rot so strong I gagged. It was death. The smell of something wet, decomposing, and sickeningly human. Trying to hold my breath, I rushed to a urinal. That's when I noticed the stall behind me was occupied. I could hear the slow dripping of water drip, like someone was trying to flush, but the toilet wouldn't cooperate. I didn't think much of it at the time, I just wanted to get out of there. Back in our darkened dorm, I noticed other travelers were asleep, but Tu's bed was empty. I climbed into my bunk and drifted off, only to be shaken awake moments later. Tu was back, and he looked terrified. He clamped a hand over my mouth and hissed, "Get down, now." I heard it then. Boom. Clunk. Something was moving outside our door. We dove under the bunk bed. Boom. Clunk. Boom. Clunk. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, growing louder, closer. Then, silence. The door creaked open, and with it came the same nauseating stench from the bathroom. My eyes stung. My stomach twisted, but I didn't move. Neither did Tu. He was trembling uncontrollably beside me, mouth clamped shut, eyes wild with terror. He looked at me, his expression was clear. Say a single word, and we die. We waited in frozen silence, until eventually I passed out from exhaustion. The next morning, we woke up under the bed. The smell was gone, but we could still feel the wrongness in the air. We didn't speak a word as we packed. Then we heard it. Sirens. Chaos in the hallway. We peeked outside to see 2 men carrying a body bag down the stairs. Bright orange. full. Someone had died in the hostel. As they passed our door, that same smell drifted in. Death had a scent, and it had visited us. We checked out immediately. The manager offered us free nights. We refused. Weeks passed. We didn't talk about it, not until we were safely back in the States. Then, one night, Tu finally told me everything. The moment we had checked in, he saw a man waving at him to come upstairs. Thinking nothing of it, he followed into the men's bathroom on the second floor. That's where he first smelled the stench. Something told him to run, so he did. At the diner, when he froze mid-laugh, he had looked out the window and saw the same man standing at the hostel's entrance, watching. At the bar, the man had entered the restroom just before him. That's why Tu vanished. He didn't want to follow him again. And that night, under the bunk bed, when I couldn't see anything, Tu saw him. The man entered our room. He sat directly on Tu's lower bunk, right above us. Tu saw his feet hanging down. The skin was green, swollen, the heels split open and oozing, the toes black and twisted. It was inhuman. But worst of all was the feeling that the man wanted Tu to find him. Maybe his body had been rotting in that bathroom for days. Maybe longer. Maybe his spirit lingered until someone finally saw him. But Tu? Tu wasn't playing that game. Fuck that shit, he said. I agreed. Definitely fuck that shit. If you're reading this, maybe don't go looking for cheap hostels in Daegu. And if you do hold your breath in the bathroom, you might smell something that never left. Title: The House Behind Apsan. You ever feel like a place didn't want you there? Not just in a bad vibes way. I mean a place that watches, that waits, that hates. I lived in Daegu, near a place called Apsan, App Mountain. Beautiful during the day. Hiking trails, scenic views. But the neighborhoods at its base, they were different. Old apartments, yellowing brickwork, rusted balconies, stories floated around, people jumping from rooftops, screaming at shadows, seeing things. But I never believed in ghosts. Not until that house. I moved into a place across from a U.S. military base. The house was over 40 years old, but my family loved the renovations. Me? I hated it from the second we stepped in. It wasn't the moldy wood paneling or the antique light fixtures that clicked randomly when no one was near. It was the air, stagnant, heavy, like the house hadn't taken a breath in years. And then the water started coming out black, smelling like something dead had seeped into the pipes. We called the water company again and again. They never found a reason. And then we opened the basement. That should have been the first warning. A concrete hole, cracked tiles, an old shed out back, next to an empty doghouse with bones scattered near it. Animal bones, I told myself. Just animal bones. That's when everything changed. Every night at 4 a.m., the woman next door screamed. Not a scared scream, a mad one, screaming at her son to shut the blinds, even when they were already closed. This went on for 6 months, until she was evicted for losing her mind. And that's when we started losing ours. Electronics blared in the dead of night, TVs, radios, alarms, all at once. We unplugged everything. They still turned on. My grandmother collects clocks, grandfather clocks, electronic ones, even the creepy ones that chime. One night, they all went off together, even the ones without batteries. My uncle, upstairs, said he'd wake up to a freezing room, middle of summer, no AC. He swore he heard breathing, not his own. Then came the intercom. It buzzed. 2:44 a.m. Someone pressed it and knocked violently on the back door. We thought it was the gas guy. My grandmother went to check. When she opened the door, something shoved it from the outside. Hard. Too hard. She barely managed to bolt it shut. I grabbed a kitchen knife and opened it again, thinking I'd find someone. But there was nothing. No person. No footsteps. The gate was still locked. The wall had shards of glass cemented to the top. No blood. No torn clothes. No escape route. We called the gas company. He was across the city. Called the police. They checked everything. The locks, the yard, nothing. No break-in, no signs of forced entry. Then we checked the CCTV footage. The door flung open on its own, as if pushed by something you couldn't see. But the footage was clear, crystal clear, and there was no one there. Just air. But you could feel it. Something was there. We moved out a month later. That house? It was built near a shaman temple. War had passed through that land. The original owner had lost her mind, living in filth and silence for 30 years. They said she used to talk to things in the walls. She died alone. Her son sold the place cheap. I never saw a ghost. Not clearly. But I felt them, watching from corners, moving in mirrors, sitting in silence behind locked doors. You can tell yourself it's coincidence, or you can admit the truth. Some houses are just not meant to be lived in. And Apsan, it's still there, still watching, still waiting. Title: Forgotten Students. This happened in Seoul, back in the early 90s. I was working part-time as a night security guard at a high school downtown, just a few nights a week. Easy job, right? Lock the gates, walk the halls, and don't fall asleep. The school was old, built in the 60s, but it still smelled like chalk dust and mold, the kind of place where the ceilings drip when it rains, and you hear creaks even when no one's moving. The first few nights were boring and uneventful. Then came Tuesday. It was around 2 a.m. I was doing my rounds when I heard something. A girl's voice, soft, just for a second, like she was humming. At first I thought maybe it was a radio left on, or maybe a window open somewhere. But the sound came from the second floor, so I followed it. The school was pitch black, except for the weak yellow light from my flashlight. Every footstep echoed, like it didn't belong to me. When I reached the room, I could see it. A very faint light on, just a candle, flickering inside a classroom. I opened the door, and there she was, a student, sitting at her desk, hunched over a notebook, studying by candlelight. She looked up. Her face was pale, eyes wide and glassy. She smiled at me like she knew me, like she was relieved, and then she vanished, right in front of me, gone. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the empty chair. I remembered her face. I remembered it because I'd seen it before, on a missing persons flyer, a year ago. She was one of ours, a student who disappeared, never found. I told the cops. They didn't believe me, but they searched the school anyway. They found her body in the attic, rotting, curled up next to a notebook, the same one I saw her writing in. She'd been up there for months. No one knew. No one heard a thing. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of my experiences. A few weeks later, I transferred schools. I told myself it was just trauma, stress, grief, but I didn't want to be anywhere near that place. The new school was quieter, nicer, new building, no stories. Until my first night, 10 p.m., I saw a boy in a classroom, just sitting there writing. He didn't react when I walked in, just said, "Sorry, I was studying." I said it was okay. I offered to walk him out. He didn't say much, just told me his name. Next day, I mentioned it to the teacher. He paused, looked confused, asked me to repeat the name. Then he just said, "No, that's not possible." That boy had killed himself the month before. In that classroom, I lasted 3 more nights before I quit. On my last night, I did one final sweep, and I heard something. Again, footsteps, not mine, just behind me, then ahead of me, then next to me, and then the sobbing started. Not loud, not hysterical, just broken, like someone crying through clenched teeth. I turned a corner and saw her, a woman, standing in the hallway, face buried in her hands. She looked up, and I swear to you her eyes were missing, just dark sockets, leaking black. I ran. I didn't even look back. I just ran straight out the front door and never returned. That was decades ago, but sometimes, even now, when I walk past schools after dark, I stop, I wait, and I listen, because I know what I heard. I know what I saw. They're still there. The girl with the candle, the boy with no voice, the woman in the hall. They don't leave. They just wait for the next person to walk the halls.